Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Nirmal Raja, curator of the exhibition Reimagining the Global Village that is currently up at MIAD's Frederick Leighton Gallery. The exhibition explores collaboration as a spectrum, ranging from singular artist to artist collaborations, socially engaged community projects, and global collectives. This is the second of the 3 events planned in association with the exhibition. Today, we focus on transnational collaborations between artists and communities. When artists situate themselves as global citizens, which reminds me, I have to share screen. Okay. When artists situate themselves as global citizens and worked with communities across cultures and countries, their impact is large in scale, providing the people they work with a sense of purpose, belonging, healing, and voice. They literally knit the world together. Large issues of climate change, refugees at the border, and sustainability lend themselves to innovative social practice methods that are inclusive and expansive. Drew Matott, who's here with us today, received his MFA in Book and Paper Arts from Columbia College, Chicago, and his BFA in printmaking from Buffalo State College. Drew lives in Hamburg, Germany, where he divides his time between teaching for the Hochschule, completing studio work, and designing new papermaking endeavors for Peace Paper Project, which is an international community arts initiative utilizing traditional papermaking as a form of trauma therapy, social engagement, and community activism. Since its creation in 2011, it has conducted hundreds of workshops worldwide in conjunction with community leaders, mental health professionals, and art therapists with over 30,000 workshop participants. They helped launch 40 papermaking programs that use papermaking as a form of healing and community engagement. The project is dedicated to helping strengthen communities. We have a collection of works made in several countries in workshops run by the Peace Paper Project in the exhibition. Virginia Zanetti is an artist and art professor living in Prato, Italy. She holds a degree in painting with honors at the Academy of Fine Arts in Florence, specializing in art education. She works both in unconventional spaces and Italian and foreign institutions for culture and contemporary art, such as the Man of Nuoro, Palazzo Strozzi in Florence, the CAC Pecci in Prato, the Kunsthalle of Bern, the Italian Cultural Institute of New Delhi and Zurich. Virginia has 2 bodies of work in the exhibition. Abysses involved residents and migrants living in Zurich in collaboration with Italian Cultural Institute, Migration Museum, on curating space in Zurich, and Traffic Gallery. Abysses is a project investigating the concept of abyss and immense depth as a metaphor for the impenetrability of human destiny. It wants us to reflect on the dramatic issue of migrants through creative collective action. Stars are embroidered with gold thread on a single piece of ultramarine blue fabric. The other project, The Pillars of the Earth, is still in progress in several parts of the world. The work aims at reversing the point of view. It is a collective action that gives a new view on the possibility of people's emancipation. The action reverses the perspective. The individual supports the world, along with others. The crucial nuance being whether to play an active or passive role in society. Raoul Deal is an interdisciplinary artist and educator who often works collaboratively in community settings. He is a faculty member of the Peck School of Arts and an artist in residence for UWM's Cultures and Communities program. In addition to his community art commissions, Deal has exhibited both individually and collectively in museums and galleries in the United States and Mexico. Deal discovered through teaching that collaboration and community lies at the heart of his work. To me, it's important to be in conversation with others. That's the way I learn about the world. That's the way I understand who I am in the world, said Deal. He is co-teaching a class in community arts with Rina Yoon at MyEd and UWN this semester, and has worked with both artists who are here today. I will now turn it over to Raoul Deal to moderate the discussion. Thank you so much, Raoul.
Thank you, Nirmal, for inviting me to moderate the discussion, really rich discussion, I think, with these interesting topics. Just a point of clarification, Rina Yoon and I are collaborating on a project with Virginia Zanetti, and we're going to be talking about that a little bit later. And I was also invited by Rina to participate in the workshops that Drew carried out in front of MyEd, although our classes are separate. Today the discussion is going to be framed around two questions. And the first one is, why would artists work with communities? And the second is, what are some of the rewards and challenges of doing this in other countries? And I'm going to speak for just a moment about my own work, both as an artist and an educator, using these strategies. In my background, I really grew up in a multicultural household, and I went back and forth between Mexico and the United States all through my youth. I went to first grade in Costa Rica. I wrote Spanish before I wrote in English. And so this idea that we experience life in a multilingual way was part of my upbringing. We had foreign students coming into our household all the time. And so we were exposed to that from a very early age. When I got out of art school, this would have been 1979, I went to South America for a year. And I traveled around. Now, 1979 in South America was a brutal place. It was, the dirty war was raging in Argentina. The Pinochet dictatorship, really murderous dictatorship, was carrying out in Chile. And so I came back with the impression that art ought to be at the service of people. And I saw so many examples of it while I traveled. And so I kind of shifted my worldview. I became very political, both as a person and as an artist. Later, I moved to Mexico. I lived in Mexico for 10 years. And I got married in Mexico. My daughter, I raised her for the first 8 years in Mexico. And I met a Cuban artist, and his name was Leandro Soto. And he started in Camote de las Sabanas in the state of Tabasco. He started a program called the Taller de Creación, the creation workshop, working with children in that community. And Nirmal, I think there's a picture of that. And so Camote de las Sabanas was not a native Spanish-speaking community. The native language there was Chontal. And art was used as a segue, and the strategy that he used was he sent the children home to gather stories from their grandparents and their families, bring them back, and together they sort of reestablished a historical memory that was being lost. And this became the basis for the subject matters that they explored as they also learned how to paint. So this experience, he invited me to teach in those workshops, and I began traveling to, I went a couple times a year for 3 years. And the experience really gave me the basis for how I began to interact in communities when I moved to Milwaukee. So in Milwaukee, I've been working in the Latinx community really since I arrived. And one of the things that I decided to do was go back 10 years later or 8 years later to Camote de las Sabanas and conduct a collaborative art making workshop with the same children. They're no longer children, now young adults, where we created an exhibit, and I learned about what they were up to at that time. I was there for a week, and we had 8 12-foot paintings and this 12-foot sculpture as a result of that. And so if we continue through those images, you'll see there's when I was able to bring them to the United States. And they gave workshops in a similar way at the Bruce Guadalupe Community School on the south side of Milwaukee. And so it was kind of a full circle event that the children in Milwaukee, it turns out, were also trying to recover lost sort of cultural heritage. And these young artists became the vehicle for that. So I began working, interviewing families and working with children from these families. And I did an exhibit about that included collection, creating an archive of the immigration stories from these children. I worked with adults in that process also. And throughout my activities as an artist and educator, I try and get students involved in all of these projects. So I'm going to pass this on in just a moment, but I do want to say that for me, working in communities really is a vital part of just growing as a human being and as an artist. It's transformative to me. And my main motive, I often think, is friendship. And the reason I say that is because friendship allows for the bridging of any obstacles that come up. It at least lays groundwork for a conversation. And so with that, I'll turn the conversation over to my friend, Drew Matott.
Okay, I'm unmuting. Oh, hello. Thank you, Raoul. Yeah, so can you hear me? Everybody can hear me okay? This is okay. So yeah, I'm Drew Matott. I'm the director of the Peace Paper Project. You know, my main role as the director of the Peace Paper Project is to travel around the world and set up different hand paper making studios that use paper making as a free and social engagement and fine art making. And so since 2011, yeah, we've set up over 40 different programs across the globe. So from New Zealand to Iran, Turkey, Belarus, Poland, Germany, Spain, the United Kingdom, France, and all over America. And I think that I can really just speak kind of quickly to this idea of why I think it's important to work with communities that are outside of my original area of development. I guess I could say my country, my county, my town, my neighborhood, you know, the point of kind of divergence from where I'm comfortable, you know. And so as an artist, I think it's really important that we push our comfort boundaries. We push our comfort areas as far as we can and as much as possible. And I think that's where, for me, the growth comes as an artist, when I find myself in a situation or involved in a project or a program that pushes me to learn and develop and adapt and create. And that's been my mantra for the work that I do personally, as well as with communities, is to kind of push our comfort zone so that we're working together to try to collaborate and understand and come to an understanding. So I think that's one of I think why I like to work outside of my original development area, say upstate New York, then, you know, Western New York and Seattle and Chicago and San Francisco and all these different places I've been. It's like every time you go to a new area and you kind of push yourselves outside your comfort zone, then you grow, and then your comfort zone kind of gets bigger, and so then you push yourself a little bit further and you get bigger and get bigger. And I think by the time I was finished with my graduate studies, I had my first invitation internationally and was in Calcutta and Delhi working with women and young children who had been rescued from human trafficking. And then basically after that, the world was at my doorstep for this kind of work that I do. In 2016, I came with, through the Peace Paper Project, I had a break between workshops and engagements I was doing in Ukraine and in Poland, which actually the work that's on display in the galleries from both of those different regions from those workshops. And so I came to Hamburg, Germany, essentially because I wanted to see if Peace Paper Project could offer something to work with the different migrant and refugee populations that I'd read about in a Time magazine, of all things. And so I moved here and brought my Hollander beater and met with some cultural officers and some different local artists. And the next thing I knew, I had different workshops lined up in the different refugee centers, and we were making paper with the refugees. And this was definitely something that was very much outside of my comfort zone. You know, we were doing the workshops in German and Arabic, and sometimes in English, and these were with culture people that I had no real understanding of where they came from. I had only ever kind of heard about them through working with the different veteran populations in America. And so through these initial engagements, I began to learn and adjust and grow. And at the end of the first month of kind of being here in Hamburg, I decided to stay. The cultural office offered me a visa and you know, a stipend and so on and so forth. And so I remained. And what I decided to do was to take one of these integration classes that so many of the different migrants were mandatory for them to take in order to receive their money from the government. So I said, well, let me take one of these integration classes and see what people are all kind of experiencing, and then it's a good way for me to integrate. And so it's essentially a language class with, you know, certain manner skills integrated into it. And so the first day of the integration class, you know, there were 30 of us all together crammed in this small room, and we went around the room and introduced ourselves. And so, you know, there were many people from Iraq, there were a lot of folks from Syria, there were some people from South America, there was a couple folks from Afghanistan. And so people were like, you know, I'm from Afghanistan and I was a mechanic, or I'm from Iraq and, you know, I worked in the market. And so it came to me and I said, hi, I'm Drew and I'm an artist and I'm from New York. And so I really felt like I was stood out like a sore thumb. And I kid you not, one guy across the table took his paper, he crumpled it up, and he looked straight at me and he threw the piece of paper down and said, "America is kaput." And then the next thing I knew, he was hammering his fist on the table, and he was like, "America is kaput." And then the number of the folks in my classroom started to hammer their fists down, and they started to chant together, "America is kaput." And the instructor said, "Stop, stop, stop." And she got them all to stop. And she's like, we all come from different parts of the world. We're all coming from different areas, and we're all bringing our own life stories. We're all bringing where we come from together here now, and we're uniting as Germans. And they stopped. And I remember this one guy looked at me, he pointed at me. And I thought, oh man, I do not want to come back tomorrow to this class, you know? And so every day, you know, for 6 weeks, this integration course was, every day before I went to class, I looked in my apartment and I thought about where I was living and what I was doing. And I thought, well, do I really want to go to this class? You know, that made me feel super, super uncomfortable. Not the language skills, not the cultural skills. This stuff was easy. It was the engagement that I had with these people who clearly did not want me there. They clearly, in the beginning, did not want me there. And so every day I kind of went, and every day I showed up 20 minutes early. I always sat close to the door because I was really, really uncomfortable. And as the 6 weeks kind of unfolded, you know, I would show up early every day, and I had my little workbook out, and I opened my workbook, and I would, you know, kind of work on my homework assignments, and the men and women would come in, and they would start to look over my shoulder and kind of copy some of my notes from my workbook. And at some point, I just decided, well, I should just pass my workbook around. So I just started to pass my workbook around, and everybody was copying from my workbook. And then I remember it was maybe 3 weeks into the course, one of the students, you know, we'd go around the room and take turns reading off the answers to the assignment, and one of the students got it wrong. And so everybody flipped over their pencil and they started erasing at the same time. And the instructor looked at me and she was like, "Oh, you did it again, Mr. Matott," you know, sharing your, you know, because she was on to us this idea that I was sharing my notebook with everybody. And so when one person got the question wrong, everybody got it wrong. And so students started to show up early, and we all started to just kind of stay late, like during lunch. We had a little lunch break and things. And I started to know some of the folks. Like I would hang out around the map, which was in the room, and I asked individuals where they were from, what was their journey like, and people started to talk about it in English, kind of where they came from. I'm from this part of Afghanistan. I came through here. I ran because of this reason, and I started to invite these individuals to my workshops in my workshop space to see the different paper making, and folks started to come down, and we started to make paper together. And the very last meeting that we had for this class, this integration course, everybody was invited to bring in their traditional food. It was like a big potluck kind of party, and kind of like share their traditional foods, and then we all celebrated kind of finishing this course. And so, I'm from America, so I didn't want to feel like bringing a burger and a beer. That's what I would have offered. And so I decided what I would do is I took an American flag that had been given to me from an United States veteran who served in Afghanistan, that was Florida Base. And this was in Madison, Wisconsin. He gave me his flag, and he said, transform this into something beautiful. My experiences here were horrific. So I pulped this material in my studio with Afghani and Syrian and Iraqi refugees, and we made it into sheets of paper. And then we printed a German poem on it about making paper. And then I framed it. And so at the very last workshop that I had with all of these, my peers, I gave each one of them one of these framed pieces of artwork. And on the back side, I scotch taped one star from the flag that we saved. We cut out all the stars, and I scotch taped the star on the back. And then I wrote a state like Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana. And so I was like, this is a gift from America, to you. And so people were like, I
have to interrupt you, Drew, because we're going to have to move on to Virginia.
Okay. But yeah, thank you very much. So that's kind of, I would say, I like push your envelope and the good things will follow, in short.
So Virginia, again, the reminder of what we're thinking about right now, the overarching questions that we have are, why do artists work with communities? And why do artists do that transnationally? What are the rewards for you and challenges?
Okay. I think I can say why working with communities is important to me as an artist. Because in my research, the other as opposite to the self constitutes the starting point to explore ideas of separation and harmony, with the purpose to allow the recognition of our link with the community and the environment. I have always thought that the whole world was my place, and I think that this is for all humans and then for artists. I usually collaborate with people from different fields and countries because I think that the human being evolves through the knowledge of the different. So for me, it's important to dialogue with other cultures. And I am very interested in trying to see things from different point of view. And in my opinion, the artworks should always open new visions. When I build the work, it has to surprise me in first person, intrigue, stimulate, question. Otherwise, I get bored, and in the worst cases, I get irritated. And this point is fundamental because before being an artist, I am a great art lover. And I believe that it is essential that the work is alive and that artists don't offer academic lessons or simply follow well-assimilated codes or fashions. However, my intention is not to go in search of novelty, rather to go in depth with the others. This is possible only by trying to remain open and at the service of art and people. All of my work starts with image that I try to capture in what Jung calls the collective unconscious, or in what comes to me from what Rudolf Steiner defines as the spirit of the time. My artistic practice owes its genesis to small illuminating visions that I try to realize through shared experience. So I try to create these visions with people, and I direct people towards an imaginary that I have to understand too. So the photographic, video, or sculptural works which I create in a choral way from collective actions are the result of a trigger and a partial control on my part. I involve people in something in which I act as an intermediary, like as if I were an instrument of awareness that we think that it is new, but only because we see in a perception different. So we perceive it in a different way. For example, this image of the work The Pillars of the Earth, I started in India, of people holding the earth with their hands, is a very famous image among Hindus. It is that one of Krishna raising the hill of Govardhan to protect the inhabitants from the rain god Indra's wrath. And so I believe that these metaphorical images, of which religions are rich, have a great visual power and contain ancient truths, always current. The images that are created, therefore, have common remote roots to which the artists draw cyclically with a renewed sense. And for Abysses, the other work with the blue ultramarine fabric, the embroidery with people from all over the world was an opportunity to share and collect memories related to the sea and life. And this practice became a projection of desires and memories to compose a sort of constellations made of today's dreams of people, of migrants. And if we consider the etymology of the word desire, from the Latin is de, that have a negative meaning, plus sidus, star. Desire literally means lack of stars, of good omens, by extension a feeling of lack, and consequently a passionate research, also towards the others. And this work therefore wants to transform the individual fear of unknown into a creative act of collective and global hope. After the Second World, also my grandfather was a migrant. He left Padua to go to Prato, to come to Prato, the city where I live, and the city is near Florence. And in the course of the performative action, I shared my personal history, and I invited each participant to embroider a star with a precious golden thread, whose shape recalls the one painted by Giotto in the Heavenly Vault. the vault of the Scrovegni Chapel in Padua, the city of my grandfather. And so at the end of the performance, the fabric that at the beginning was a sea, the color of the ocean, becomes the subject of this symbolic action, because become a sky, raised toward the sky, the blue become the sky itself. So we made a very strong transformation, or a symbolic transformation, and it was supported by the same people who have imagined it, from people from all over the world without any boundaries.
Virginia, I must apologize. I think we need to leave it at that. That's such a lovely story. And I think it's giving us some insight into your own creative process and interest in incorporating mythology and metaphor and all of these wonderful things into your very poetic work. We'll come back to that. We'll talk more about it in a moment. I think we can move into the next section, Nirmal. And you know, as we move into this, we're going to be talking for about 10 minutes about the work that we've done with Virginia and also with Drew at MyEd. And this was a sort of cooperative activity that Rena Yoon's students and my students from UWM were involved with in different ways. And on UWM's side, I do have to thank the people that helped fund that, and that was the Center for 21st Century Studies and the Peck School of the Arts. This has been a very enriching experience for us. We're going to start off talking about the workshops that Drew carried out in front of MyEd. And I want to ask this question to Drew. I know that you work both within communities using art as a means for processing trauma. And then you do a US tour. And that, of course, has a different kind of a purpose. And you're working now with art students. And here's video actually of those in process. Can you talk a little bit about how each of those informs the other?
Oh, thank you, Raoul. Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I mean, the primary function of the American tour is twofold. It's one, to raise funds for the operation of the Peace Paper Project, which spends the money abroad, whether it's in Belarus or Poland or wherever. Currently, we're developing a program in Hungary, so that's where the funding is going. So it's fundraising, but it's also a way for me as an artist to basically take my experiences while I'm traveling abroad away from America, and to bring these experiences back to share with different students, whether they're art students or art therapy students or just students of technology or whoever. And so in this way, it kind of my personal experiences abroad and can be brought home to the home country and shared with individuals. And I hope that it inspires them to get on an airplane or a bus or a train and travel somewhere new for them, and for them to kind of step outside their home area to have different experiences. So it's kind of twofold. It's one for fundraising, and it's two for me to be able to bring these stories back to where I came from.
I'm sorry, from the other side of the equation, as an artist and educator, having you come through and work with people, I've seen it on several occasions in Milwaukee. I think that you're leaving a strategy with students that excites them, and they often carry that into their own art practices. And the first exposure being the work that they did in a piece paper workshop. So that's worth noting.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
I wonder if we can move forward. And Virginia had, we had corresponded earlier, and the project that we worked together on with students from Rena Yoon's class as well is called Be a Poem. And it's a project that you've done at least one other time, and perhaps more, I don't know. Is it one time, Virginia, besides this?
Sorry?
Yeah, you've done this on one other occasion, right? The Be a Poem project, or on many occasions?
No, only the first occasion was after the first lockdown in Italy.
Okay, I'm going to read. Shall I read the statement for that project?
Yeah, yes, please, as you prefer.
So the statement that actually introduces the original film documentation of the project is this: the emergency of COVID-19 has turned the creative act into life itself, but poetry still proves to be one of the best ways to transcend time. Embroidery is an effective technique to induce meditation and calm the mind. It can become a good way of communication. During the lockdown, the artist wrote thoughts down and then used gold thread to embroider them on personal clothing. Finally, she shared this practice with other people, everybody expressing their own thoughts about this period of isolation and embroidering them. These sentences have become a series of poems to wear together to build a shared grammar able to overcome the boundaries and isolation. And it was that which, with which Virginia introduced her project to our group of students who met just twice at MyEd and worked over Zoom with Virginia for a couple hours each time.
Yes, it was amazing because also for the Pillars of the Earth work in India, I started to work by remotely. There every Sunday, young people from a rural village of jungle came to connect with me. But after this pandemic, to work transnationally and holding this workshop there was even more exciting, because making a work together, sharing thoughts through poetic phrases, yes, one's personal, yes, on they spoke on personal and collective crisis. So phrases are very strong, and overcoming the distance of the ocean and the restriction, also the time zone, all is very incredible. And every time I work with people, I'm surprised by the depth, creativity, and potentialities that human beings have. The students have embroidered in a particular part of their clothes related, yes, to their body, like this. But everyone chose a different place. It was like an energetic place or something like this. And yes, they embroidered really powerful sentences in which each of us, yes, can feel touched in some way. And so it's very interesting for me both to learn from different cultures and to experiment also the similarities and the closeness of every human being.
I remember
So,
that.
Yes, I'm very curious to see the video, the final video.
just in introducing that, I remember that the question was asked when you introduced the project. First, you said, think of something that is broken, and then a phrase or a sentence that might fix it. And so I asked you the question, do you mean a social issue or a personal one? And your answer was, to me, there's no difference. And
Yeah.
I think that inspired everybody to think in this new way that was interesting and impacted the phrases they came up with. And I want to say, you know, Taka Suzuki has put together, or is putting together, a documentation of that process. And we have a portion of that film here that Nirmal is showing right now, and we can just watch that in silence for a moment if you want to let the sound go.
Thank you.
Yo soy, which of course means I am. And participants were instructed to think profoundly about the phrases that they had come up with as they put their article of clothing on, and then wear it with this sort of profound reflective thought. You are able. This is a student from MyEd who wrote, con dinero o sin dinero, hago siempre lo que quiero. With money or without money, I always do whatever I want. And that's a phrase from a ranchera, a Mexican ranchera, really connecting him with something that was important in his family, a song. The former one said, Cardinal, you're here. And throughout the project, students have been reflecting, writing written reflections, and they're going to create Spark pages that document their experiences. So those are the outcomes. So there you have an excerpt from that documentation. Virginia is also seeing it for the first time. So that was the project that we're still underway with, Virginia. We're wrapping that one up. It's going to be exhibited for a couple weeks downstairs in the entrance to MyEd, and there'll be a monitor with the completed video also available for people to view. I think that this might be a nice time for us to open up discussion for questions from the people, from the audience. Would anybody like to, if you have a question, you can simply turn on your mic and speak up. Well, I always have lots of questions in these forums. So I wanted to talk a little bit about strategies and similarities and differences in the way that both Drew and Virginia are working with the communities that they're working with. One of the things that I wanted to observe is that Virginia talked about the idea of where's my note here? The idea of remaining open, and in the projects that you're proposing, you're often inviting participants to carry out actions which you have sort of preconceived and to share in spaces of what I would call shared vulnerability. And in as much as they're able to do that, there's it kind of deepens the profound effect that the possibilities the project presents have. Would you agree with that? Are you looking for shared spaces of vulnerability?
I'm not sure to have understand the questions. Can you?
Yeah, let me rephrase it a little bit. Oftentimes in collaborative art making, when you're working with communities, people are able to let go of this idea of an ego and work in a collective way. And the only way that that seems possible to be in community with others is to share in vulnerability and to be empathetic. And in my perspective, your projects are sort of fostering that kind of shared space and that collective experience of being in community and sharing vulnerable space.
Okay. You say about, you are talking about the importance of the space, also the like the environment in this project.
Yeah, I'm talking about process, I guess, in addition to actually ending up with well, let's talk about a poem, for instance. You end up with an article of clothing which has a phrase which you have invented, which you know addresses this theme that is important about isolation and about mending things that are broken, right? But this is all being carried out in the same space with somebody else working next to you on the same idea from their own personal experience. It looks like you might have a translation there.
Oh, yeah, Matera, okay. I think that when people work, I am not sure to understand what your consideration, but I create a sort of structure of the project always when everyone we have a sort of goal to recreate this first image that I had and I try to share with people, but everyone always is not like everyone. Also, if we have a vision, a shared vision and a common goal, everyone can be very different with the others and can express themselves in with limits. So I give always limits, but also in that limit, the personality, the potentiality, the creativity of everyone can come in a different way. And for this, I say that I live always in open and I direct a little bit, but I leave something always open, and we create together a sort of flow.
Mm-hmm.
That, and everyone working in community, you always discover that everyone brings something new in the project, and we co-create thing. Yeah. Every one of us have an ego, but yes, what I try to experiment when I work with the community is first of all on me, try to be a sort of an instrument, and so people perceive this, and we become a sort of community, wandering community, really related with the environment too. The environment is.
Yeah, I like Marcia McDonald points out, you can come with your ego, feel safe and accepted. So you've got a vessel, which is a project that you are proposing. And within that, people can push up against with their own individuality in whatever ways their personal experience leads them. It's kind of what my colleague Rena Yoon talked about, like a joint project more than anything, where we're working, carrying out the same actions in the same space, but we don't know what's going to happen until it's all together in the same place, which is what the video is going to help accomplish. I want to kind of direct a similar question to Drew. The idea of sharing space, with people that you're working with, and how you get them to process things that are so profoundly personal. What are your strategies to do that?
First and foremost, when kind of conducting these kinds of workshops, I think the priority is creating a space that's safe, where people feel safe and comfortable to express their voices, their own personal voice. I'm not sure ego comes into the play at all in any of the work I do. It's really about establishing a space where people feel comfortable and able to come to the table and explore a new creative process, and hopefully enter a personal journey, through that process. But we're not creating work that goes up on a gallery wall, generally speaking. We're creating work that's about the human experience that these people have had, that then they go home with, and then whether it's a book that's been bound with their story in it, or it's a photograph that's been printed on paper, it's something that they get to keep and they put on their walls in their dining room or their living room, or they share it with their grandparents, or they pass it on to their grandchildren. And so I think the most important thing for me in the work that I do is about creating a space where people are comfortable. And so the workshops that I'm involved with orchestrating and organizing, they can be up to 2 years in the conceptualizing and developing stage. Because, as you can imagine, a workshop that's in Tehran is going to be different than a workshop that's in Kiev. That's going to be different than a workshop in, here in Hamburg. And so the issues are different, the cultures are different, and while the processes remain the same, we want to create an environment where people feel invited and feel like they want to be a part of these creative forces, especially with papermaking, because papermaking is kind of a down and dirty and wet and somewhat annoying and laborious and tiring process. It's not, yeah, I'm going to go to the gym, or I'm going to, ride a Ferris wheel or whatever. Papermaking is kind of a pain in the ass. And so to get a normal average person to come, it's not easy. So it takes a lot of strategy.
I'm seeing Nirmal's got these thoughts that seem interesting. She says, first of all, about the therapeutic process of just making, the power, therapeutic power of making. And also, both of your work is about transforming materials and thoughts from one state to the other. Maybe there's something important in that.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to some of the therapeutic power of paper, or the therapeutic, I guess, ability of paper making, and it goes directly into the kind of transformative element. Somebody who brings in an article of clothing that they had some kind of negative experience in, or a challenging experience in, and they always look at that clothing and it reminds them of this time that they were there, that this happened, that it brings them back to that moment. And then they quite physically, literally and physically, kind of break it down, grind it up, and then reform it into sheets of paper. They're taking control over that, that material. And then they're using their power as a human being to move it to another step, to another phase, whether it's a book or a journal, or whether it's a paper airplane or whatever. They take it to the next step. And I think that that's part of the therapy. I mean, there's a lot more in there. I'm not an art therapist to speak directly to it, but there's a lot of it. And then I think that the transformative element, what I've noticed through the workshop, is that, in the hundreds of workshops that I've done all over the world, the most challenging time during these workshops is one, cutting up of the rag. So taking scissors and actually physically cutting the material up. This is the most difficult part of the workshop. Somebody brings in something, it has a lot of meaning. The last thing they really are excited to do is start cutting it up. And then I think the second thing that's most difficult is when we process that cut rag into paper pulp. And so 9 out of 10 times, people stand in front of the Hollander beater and they have their hands running right through the Hollander as it's being deconstructed and transformed into paper pulp. And this is the moment in which you see a lot of tears and there's a lot of emotion.
Just closing thoughts. I think we're going to have to stop. Any closing thoughts, Virginia, about this idea of transforming materials from one thing to something else?
Okay. Yeah. I try to reply. Yes, I think the main topic of my practice is this transformation. Yes, with the actions and performances, I create both an aesthetic experience and a static experience. So generate the artwork, the final artwork, and the work are constructed by sort of rituals, or I called like Jodorowsky like a psychomagic acts to rediscover a sort of a new social conscience. And yes, so they are always, I use always symbolic tools, and it doesn't matter mediums, doesn't matter which mediums.
I'm understanding that is also the power of transformative power of ritual. it's not just in transformation of materials, it's in the transformation of stories. It's in the building of meaning through the process of creating that I think is so beautiful in your work. I must thank everybody for your participation today. It's been a rich conversation, and I'm sorry to say that we are out of time. Nirmal, thank you for putting the panel together.
Raoul, thank you so much for moderating. And Drew and Virginia, it was a pleasure having this conversation with you, and also your work in the exhibition. I so appreciate MIAD hosting this exhibition and these events, in deep gratitude to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
To all.